Okay, welcome everyone. This is the very first interview of Refreshing Educators. I'm Dr. Chelsea Foster, and I'm going to be interviewing Dr. Sandra, also known as Dr. Sandy Wilson. She is quite a hidden figure in education today. And this is quite an honor. When I thought about who I was going to start with, everyone I thought I was going to start with directed me back to Dr. Wilson. So I was quite honored to be able to have her agree to be interviewed and to share her experiences of being an educator all of these many years. So thank you. If you can, please make sure that your view is on speaker mode so you'll be able to see the two of us. And I'm going to just right now just say welcome to Dr. Sandy Wilson. If you wouldn't mind just coming off mute.
Okay.
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. I'm great, actually. I'm very happy to be here with you, on this auspicious occasion because I just think it's wonderful that someone had stepped up to bring forth our unknown heroes. They're the people who work with the children are not given the credit that they should be. And I just think that this is a wonderful idea.
Well, I have loved some of our back conversations that we've had. I got to know a little bit about you, your background. I found out that your mother's side of the family is from Culpeper, Virginia, where my family is also from. Your father's side is from Greenville, North Carolina. But I want to take us up to 1944, where you were born, when you were born, where you were born, and just to give us some background information about your upbringing, your childhood.
It's very interesting how the United States has these different areas that are populated with African Americans due to segregation and to migration. And so my parents grew up within about maybe 2 miles from each other, but in two different communities. My mother grew up in a Black community of North Hills, which was Upper Dublin Township and Abington Township. And my father grew up 2 miles away in an Italian neighborhood where they were the only Black family. And they lived in Cheltenham. He went to Cheltenham schools. So it was kind of interesting that these two people came together because there was a Black church, and that's where they met. So when I was born in the Abington Hospital. My father was in World War II. He was away in France. And that's a whole nother story about, African Americans during the war. And at the time that I was born in Abington Hospital, it was segregated. And even within the hospital and the cemeteries. And so the Black women had their children. It just so happened I was born in June, and they were placed in the porch area. That's where they allowed them to stay. And so
of the hospital.
So I grew up basically my early years with my grandparents in North Hills, and therefore my interaction with people of other ethnic groups was not available. It was just what I knew, and then we moved to Willow Grove. And when we moved to Willow Grove, we moved to a segregated community.
Okay, that's what I wanted to find out.
Yeah, it was a Black school.
Mm-hmm.
It was a Black school. And when my parents bought their home, there's two kinds of segregation. There's de facto segregation and de jure segregation. We happened to be a family that moved in an all-white street. And the interesting thing was that the school, the Black school, was 2 blocks away. So all the kids that were on the street had gone to the white school. But when the Black family moved on that street, it made a difference. So they were designated to go to the Black school. So what the parents did was to enroll their children in Catholic school. So I was the only child on that street that went to the Black school, which was 2 blocks away.
Now, were there any Black educators in your school at that time?
Yes, in fact, almost all of the educators in that school were Black. I had a white kindergarten teacher and a white second grade teacher. Wonderful. They were wonderful. They were there because they wanted to be there. It wasn't because they were, forced to be there. And so, and then the principal was white and the secretary was white, right? So
But everyone else in the school was a person of
everybody
color.
was Black. I think there was one white child in the school. So until they passed Brown versus Board of Ed. When they passed Brown versus the Board of Ed, they integrated the schools in Roslyn and in Willow Grove. And they put some of them in
1954?
In 50, well, they passed it in 54, but they didn't build this school until 55. So then that's when I first met integration. And I was placed in a school with a teacher who did not particularly want me in the classroom. So, as a fifth grader, you can kind of feel these things. So that was really kind of new to me. So it was interesting coming through that school, going to fifth and sixth grade integration, and then going into the high school that was totally integrated at that time.
What was that transition like, though? I know that currently in Abington Township, there's elementary school that goes up to sixth grade. There's a junior high, 7th, 8th, and 9th, and then the high school is 10th to 12th. So what was happening at the time when the students integrated and the students were moving from elementary to middle school? I believe in our conversations that you said that the elementary schools were segregated, and by the time desegregation happened was the point when you were getting ready to go to middle school. But traditionally, what was the practice?
Well,
with students going to middle school?
Prior to the integration, my understanding was that the NACP were fighting for a change, and the change was that the kids that graduated from elementary school, from Park School, because we lived like a block from Willow Grove Park, which everybody came to, they had to fight that the kids were not placed in a sixth grade plus. Instead of placing the students right into 7th grade, they were trying to put them into something called a sixth grade plus because they felt they weren't ready for 7th grade because they were coming from a Black school. The interesting thing was when I went to a reunion, I think it was the 50th year reunion of high school. This fella came over to me, a white fella, and he said, "Oh, I remember you so well. I had a crush on you in 5th grade." I had no idea who he was, but he was a nice guy. And I said to him, he said, "Remember we had a really good time in 5th grade." And I said, "I didn't have a good time in 5th grade." But see, he didn't understand that because he was a child and he didn't see what the 5th grade teacher, what she was doing to the few of us who were African Americans in that particular classroom. So it was kind of traumatizing. So you just stayed low key, but you learned everything that you possibly could learn. And then to go into the high school, when I was in 8th grade, you were supposed to select whether you wanted to be in what rosters, the academic, did you want to be in junior business training or the general? So most of the Black students were placed in general education. I was one of few who they placed in junior business training. But my mother was a beautician, so she had her own business. My father was a custodian for the school, and he spoke to the principal at his school, who called the high school and told them to put me in the academic courses. And that's how I became part of the academic stream. But most of the African American students were placed in junior business training.
So you were fortunate to have someone advocate for you at that time and to understand the inner workings of the systems. So as you went into high school, tell us a little bit about that. You graduated in 1962, and history tells us 1963, there was a huge case that happened, Shemp versus Abington, which was a pivotal time. It was when prayer was taken out of schools. And so that was the year after you graduated, but I would imagine that the buildup that led to that would have been during your time in high school. What was that like?
It
Can
was
you speak to?
interesting. Yeah, I didn't particularly like high school. I never really thought about why I didn't like high school. I was kind of like the odd girl out. And anyway, my parents were very, very strict, so I wasn't allowed to do too many things, except I did go to church and I got a good education in church. And I give church all the accolades for me being able to get up in front of people to speak, because, you know, you had to learn your Easter piece or your Christmas program and perform, and taking piano lessons and playing the piano in front of the. So the church really was a basis for a lot of my education. But I was placed on my mother did not allow, I wanted to play basketball because I was like a little bit tomboyish, you know. I wanted to play basketball. Girls weren't playing football. So but she allowed me to play hockey because she said that the sports bus came home too late and she didn't want me to walk from the bus home in the dark. So I played hockey. So, you know, there weren't really that many. Well, let's say I was on the hockey team. So um, your skill, I think the skill probably allowed people to give me some respect. I played the left fullback, and then senior year I played goalie. And I think the whole time I was there may have been maybe two blacks on. One was on the junior varsity and one on the varsity. You know, that kind of thing. So that was basically kind of an introduction. And then I remember going into my creative writing class for the first time. This was after they had made the switch, and they were reading Huckleberry Finn. And if you know Huckleberry Finn, they talk about Nigger Jim and Indian Joe, and you know. And so I'm sitting there this first day, and it was really kind of interesting to me because some of the students were having a hard time relating to me and reading these words, you know. And at the time, I did not like it. I didn't like. Now later on, I found out I really do feel that the author was not being prejudiced so much as he was being a reporter of what was going on at the time, you know. But that was devastating to me. Or being on the track, running track, and having the track teacher, the track coach, not allow me to be in certain races so that other people had the opportunity to run and to win. So those kinds of things. Or I was on the softball team, and so being on the sports teams allowed me to have a little bit more prestige, you know. And then being in the academic courses away from a lot of the other Black students, that didn't help with my my reputation with them either. So it was you know, I was kind of in between two groups, and you had to be an individual.
So I wanted to find out though, at the point of when you were graduating, do you remember or recall what was happening at the time with Shemp versus Abington?
Yeah, I do remember Shemp. Ellery Shemp. They were Unitarians, the family. They were very much entailed with atheists, the atheist O'Hare at the time. So there were a number of cases that came together, just like Brown versus the Board of Education. There were a number of cases, but it only came up as one. But I do remember every day in school, every morning we started out with Abington, first in the alphabet, first in achievement, first in aptitude. And then the next thing was there was a prayer, you know, and the reading of the Bible. And then all of a sudden, before this case came to pass, Abington began to change that. And so they offered the students, you could stand up, you know, because we would have to stand up for this. You could stand up and not say anything, or, you know, you didn't have to stand up and pray, but and some of the students decided that they were just going to sit down. So we thought they were being disrespectful. You know, we're raised in the church, and so you pray and you read the Bible. but there was a discontent in the among the students about that, you know, and people would watch each other to see who was going to stand up and who was not going to stand up. And yeah, he was in that school while I was there, and I remember succinctly when that passed. Mhm.
So take us forward now to after your post-graduation from high school, going to college, and your entry into education.
Well, what happened is I was always the kid on the block who got the children together to play school. I kind of forced those kids to play school in a very nice way, I think. Kind of bullyish, I guess, and a very nice bully. But I would set the chairs up on the side of the house, and I'd have my bulletin board and my blackboard, and they had to do their lessons and all kinds of crazy stuff. Or I was the kid who was taking piano lessons. And I remember a little boy that lived across the street. His mother was from England, and his dad was a African American soldier. And his name was Cecil John Duval. And his mother would call him in to come in and take his piano lessons. And my nickname was Tootie. So you can play the piano like Tootie. Well, the funny thing is that Cecil John Duval became the musical director for Teddy Pendergrass. That's how good he played. But yeah, I graduated. When I graduated from high school, my parents went in to see the guidance counselor. And he told my parents that I was not college material. And he said that, and this is not something I found later on, that he did that with, you know, other people that I know. And do not send me to a Pennsylvania college, because they had certain stipulations and I wouldn't be able to meet those stipulations. So what they should do is that they should send me, I should get a job. But if they insisted, they should send me to a specific school so that I would have a great social life. So when I went to Cheney, I went in for my interview. There was no place else I was going to go but Cheney. That was going to be it. I had an uncle that had gone there, and the first Black teacher in the Abington School District, Mrs. Helen Johnson, she was a graduate of Cheney, and I had gotten a scholarship from her sorority. And so we get there, and we're talking to the dean, and he goes through my information, and he says, we don't have a transcript for you. The guidance counselor never sent the transcript to the school. So we were like, everybody was like, well, what do we do now? What, you know, he said to me, he said, look, your uncle is Fred Walton, and I expect wonderful things from you. And I'm thinking, what in the world did this guy do? Well, he was great. He graduated cum laude. He was wonderful. So he said, your SAT scores are this. He said, you don't need it. You don't need a transcript. We're going to accept you on these SAT scores. And that's how I got into school. So while I was there, I got a 4-year scholarship. You know, Richard Humphreys, who was the Quaker that started, he left the money to start a school for colored youth. And it started in 1837, which would be way before the Civil War, was the first African-American school, you know, for that. And the funny thing is, and I love to tell people this, Cheney did not start in Philadelphia. Everybody thinks it started in Philadelphia. It did not. They could not buy land in Philadelphia. So they had to go up Eastern Road, York Road, 12 miles up into the Abington area, where between Jenkintown and Abington, and they bought a huge farm with his money. And they started a school for colored youth. It was a farm school. And that's where Cheney University began.
Do you know about when it transitioned out to where it is now? Do you know when it transitioned? Because it's out near Chester.
I don't. I know that it went from there, from the farm school. It was there for years. And then it moved into Philadelphia. And then from Philadelphia out to Cheney to where it is now. And it was like a breath of fresh air when I got there, because I had, it's just like people cared about me. I was in a school where they cared about me, you know, and you could see people achieving. You know, it wasn't just a few of us achieving in roster 1, 2, and 3. It was people were achieving, and also, you know, you're at the stage of life where you're making all your own decisions about it. You know, so I, you know, teaching was where I was going to be. At that particular time, you could be a nurse or a social worker, and then the other one was the teacher. So teaching was always going to be that for me.
So what was your first teaching experience?
My first teaching experience happened when I was a junior in high school. Before that, I had, you know, you had summer jobs. You know, I had menial jobs. I had a net on my head. I was working in Horn and Hardart, washing off the tables, and I worked in a factory, you know, on a machine those summers. But my third grade teacher, Mrs. Pope, was dating Mr. Gibson. He was the mortician. But, you know, in the Black community, you have your doctors, your lawyers, your teachers, your bus drivers, your postalmen. You have people who are working in the fact. Everybody is in the Black community. So she was dating Mr. Gibson, who happened to be the president of the commissioners, which was unusual. And Abington School District was starting a program called Head Start. And Head Start was basically devised by the government to give students going into elementary school a firm basis so that they would be on chord with the other children who had opportunities. So during the summer of my junior year and my senior year, I worked as an assistant teacher in that particular program. So they hired me basically to be a teacher in Abington when I was a junior in college. They had all my information, so.
You were junior in college at that point.
Yeah.
And then upon graduating,
I rolled right
into the district.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it was interesting because they had more schools than they have now, or more elementary schools than they have now. But,
so I'm curious though, how did you navigate the race and gender barriers at that time?
It was interesting because when you are a teacher, people have these perspectives on teachers. Some of them see them as a babysitting service, right? Others see them as a way out of their situations. Different ethnic groups see them in different ways. And for instance, when I was teaching in the gifted program. I taught elementary school, first grade to third grade. And then I taught in the gifted program, which was first to sixth. And I remember when I was at Glenside Weldon, I was just starting, and I had this interview with this young lady who had 3 children. Her oldest child was in kindergarten, beautiful kids. And everything that society says is beautiful, these children were, and this mother was. She's sitting there with this baby, and this little 2-year-old is running around. And then she has this one that's going to be coming to me in first grade for the gifted program. And she says, we're having this wonderful interview. And she says to me, well, I don't want to insult you, but Susan has never been around Black people before. So I said, well, don't tell her. So she had to stop and think about it. And then I went on with my interview. So never had a problem with Susan, never had a problem with her. So those kinds of things. There was a time when they were writing a curriculum for the civil rights era. Okay, and it was going to be taught at the 5th grade level. And I think at the time I was teaching 3rd grade or 2nd grade or something, I don't know. But I had written a letter previously, years before, and I said to them, if you ever decide that you're going to write a curriculum on African-American history, I want to be included in that. Mm-hmm. They chose 3 teachers to write this curriculum. And then they decided they were going to ask the African American principal and one of the African American parents um, to just be there for their asking questions and things of that sort. And they both contacted me at the time. And I waited until they had written the curriculum because they were paying these people to do it. And then when we went into a meeting and I confronted them and I said, this is what I said to do. Well, the whole thing changed. They put me in charge of it. And then we got the curriculum rewritten because I said, how do you write a curriculum about a people when you have the people here who've been through this civil rights era and you don't include them in it? They would not do that for other ethnic groups. They didn't do it for another ethnic group. So it wasn't right to do it for them. And I became
I am curious though, you said that there was already a group that was being compensated, so you just kind of waited until they finished writing the curriculum. When you then took the helm, were you compensated?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
I was. And at the time, I think it was a little bit later I became the national president of Black Women's Educational Alliance, and it was in the newspaper. So the newspaper went over everywhere, inquired everywhere. I received a letter at my school, and it was written Sandra Wilson, director of propaganda. Yeah. So when I opened the letter up, I wish I had it. I have it here. It said, "Dear Negress, how dare you teaching our bastions of white supremacy? You need to be teaching your own how to build huts and go on welfare." And it wasn't signed. And when I got this thing, initially it scared me because I had two small children. And I said, these people, whoever this is, knows where I am. You know, they didn't know my address, but they sent it to the school. So once I calmed down, I made copies of it and sent it to the superintendent and the other principals to allow them to see that it wasn't a chip that was on my shoulder, that these things were truly happening. So negotiating through, you have to use, there's no one way to do that. You have to pay attention to what's going on and deal with it in specific ways. And you have to be supportive of each other. You can't be pulling each other down. You have to work together for the children. You have to work together for the children. It's for the benefit of all of the children, not small pockets of children, but all of the children. And one of the things that I always do with my kids is I allow them to, I said, you know, you're in this classroom because you're wonderful. They don't allow anything other than that in this classroom. You're wonderful, and you're not students, you're scholars. So you're never going to know what's going to happen in this classroom from day to day. And that kept them fired up about coming to school because there was something different every day. Mm. So when you do that, I taught classroom management. At one time I taught classroom management. So one of the things you do is you indoctrinate the class so that they kind of discipline each other. So you have to use psychology, and basically that's what you do when you are working with parents. For instance, if a parent comes in and says you're in a conference and the parent says, well, Susan said that you didn't let her go to the library yesterday, right? So it puts you on the defense. You can't be on the defense, you have to be on the offense. Well, does Susan have her books today? She can go to the library today, but she can't walk through the hallway when there's no doors and wave to the kids that are in the classroom. So there are certain times that they can go and certain times that they can't. Susan, do you have your book with you today? No. Well, she forgot it today. But you deal with it on a case by case. There's no kind of blanket thing to do. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. In some research, it's called situational leadership, knowing how to change up and how to take on different hats depending on the context.
Right. There's something called the saber-toothed tiger curriculum. The saber-toothed tiger curriculum talks about this guy named cave times. It is back in the cave times, and this guy named New Fist, I think his name was, and he came up with this curriculum called where you had to catch the fish with your bare hands, or you had to club these horses. If you're going to eat these horses, you got to run after them, you got to get them, and you got to club them. And the other thing was they had saber-toothed tigers at the time. So you have to scare the saber-toothed tigers with this fire, right? Okay, so that was great curriculum for that time. But what happens is things begin to change. You know, another age comes through. Like, for instance, the bears come instead of the saber-toothed tigers, or so you have to change. Okay, so people decide that they're going to change the curriculum. They're going to leave the old curriculum, come to the new curriculum. At the end of it, and I'm going to leave it open to you guys to go find out what the saber-toothed tiger curriculum is about. But it tells you that there was something special and long-lasting about that first curriculum. And somehow you have to hold on to that and bring it forth also with whatever new is coming through. So when you do that, and people understand that education is an ongoing thing. And one thing about teachers is successful teachers are ongoing learners also. So once you understand that, it's not about being powerful. It's not even about being the smartest person in the world, but it's about teaching people to live from day to day in a meaningful way, basically. So education to me has been a way to do other things. I paint and I write, you know, and I play music, and it gives you a chance to live and learn through other ways that you can bring all of this stuff back into your classroom, whether the kid is in preschool or at college age.
You mentioned Black Women's Educator Alliance. What are some of the ways that you have managed to stay engaged with the younger generations throughout all of these years? Even beyond.
Black Women's Educational Alliance has almost been a saving grace for me, because the women who indoctrinated me were so special. Each one of them. Well, we all have our own specialties. Everybody does. But theirs was, because I was in the field of education, that's where we dealt in leadership and education and that kind of thing. So I learned so much from them that I feel it is my responsibility to share what I have learned so that it lives on. So I try to do that in every organization that I'm in, whether it's, you know, when I was in college, I pledged, they don't say that anymore, into a sorority, into Alpha Kappa Alpha sorority, which also honed some leadership skills that I needed to have going forward. Black Women's Educational Alliance came along as I was a teacher. The NACP, I was the youth coordinator for the NACP for Eastern Pennsylvania, and I had a group in Abington where I worked with the high school kids. And it was fun. The kids wanted to come. They wanted to meet all the time. I had as many boys as I had girls, not because I was so great, but the girls were so pretty that the boys would come. So it worked out for you know, all of us. So I like doing that. I like working with BWEA because I sit and I look at all the young women who are coming through and the older women who are there to nurture them, bringing them through. It's important that you give back. It's important that, like in the sorority, I work on the history of the sorority, where it came from. How did it start? Why did it start? Why did these women get together? And now to have Kamala Harris, a Black woman in the position that she's in now, it's just amazing to me how we all do this. And you look around and see what's going on with Black women from I mean, some have never had anything. And now they're doing wonderful things and helping other people. It's just amazing to me. I'm astounded by it. So yeah, now I have grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren. I love these grandchildren. Like you would never, they don't even know how much I love them. But every time I see them, it just makes me smile. I just, feel really happy inside about them. And they're all different personalities, completely different from each other. And to me, that is so interesting because I have 2 wonderful children. I have to give myself some praise for this. They're good people. They're good people. And so I try to do that with my students in college. And I say to them, you're going out into the world, know who your children are. Make them a part of your life as well as they're a part of your life. You can teach them to pass the test. That's great. That's wonderful. But to be fantastic, to be meaningful, you have to allow the children to take that curriculum that you provided for them and use it to live that life and to share it with other people. So, it's kind of interesting how I guess it kind of keeps me young because I'm 76 years old and not in the and my mind is when I do line dancing and the woman will say something, I know all the music, and she said, "Oh, your grandchildren probably taught that to you." No, they didn't because they don't know the music that I know. They know their own music. But I try to learn who's singing what now and what kind of dances are they doing now, and it just makes life fun. And life is my thought is God didn't put you here to just be sad and miserable all the time. you know, I know I miss, I was a deacon at Bethlehem Baptist Church, one of the first women deacons to be on the board. And that's not an easy thing to do, but it worked. And now I have all of these wonderful brothers that I just dearly love and their wives. And it's just, it opened up another world for me, and it's just like a godsend. It's like a miracle how some things begin to happen for you. In the Links organization, I went into that maybe 10, 15 years ago. I really didn't. I'm a country girl, so I'm not into knowing different organizations that were more, urban and I went into it because they do wonderful things for people. And a lot of times people don't know that. But I'd been in Jamaica on a trip and I saw these kids walking around in their uniforms. And I went out into the areas and I saw that they had, they might have a spigot coming out of the ground that everybody gets their water from. Very primitive, and these kids were going to school. So when I went to the Links for beginning members, they were recruiting members. And this woman had a home. Now, she had a beautiful home in Jamaica, but she had started this program for these children in the school. And they were they gave books, they made a library, they paid teachers, they painted, they gave sports equipment. They were doing all of these wonderful things for these kids that I had just seen. And I thought, it's meant for me. This is meant for me. So I joined the organization, and instead of doing that, I was in place of health, which is kind of interesting, and took off on another vein, you see. So I think that once people understand that life opens up these little pockets for you, that they should basically try to take advantage of some of those pockets to see exactly what lies in there. That's what I think.
I want to thank you. I want to thank you for this time. We have just had the pleasure of listening to Dr. Sandra Wilson. She is a mother, a grandmother, a retired teacher, an author, a lifelong learner, and definitely a servant leader who just gives in so many different capacities. I would, before we close, like to just ask you if you wouldn't mind, just share some refreshing words of wisdom for this next generation of educators. Is there something that is kind of like your mantra, your motto, something that you just want to leave with us as we close out this interview?
My favorite movie, and it's going to sound strange to everybody, and I use it with all of my classes, from the little children to my college students, is The Never Ending Story. When you look at the Never Ending Story, they have a rock monster. Okay, so this is just some of the characters. The rock monster is big and he's ugly and everything, but when you listen to him, he has this beautiful voice, and he talks poetically, and he's just such a good soul. And he's telling people that the nothing is coming. So it turns out that if you don't have a grain of hope, your life will become nothing. You have the luck dragon who comes in just in time when luck just sweeps in all of a sudden. You have the swamps of sadness that you can drown in if you allow sadness to come through for you. And the little boy that's in the story, and there are a lot of other characters that people miss because they think it's just like a little cartoony kind of thing. But if you analyze it, you find that it's more to it. But this little boy, he loses his mother in the very beginning, and he and his father not really hitting it well. He runs into this bookstore, and the man says, "Oh no, you can't. This is a book I'm going to show you, but you can't take it." But he leaves it there so the boy can steal it, and then he goes, takes it to school. And all of these wonderful things kind of happen to you. And I want people to understand that your life is what you make it, right? When you have a grain of hope, things can change for you. But my favorite saying is that I leave, and I know it sounds childish and all, but it's good to have something childish every now and then. I put up in my room, whether it's in with my students in college, my teachers to be, because I also worked with supervising teachers in the Philadelphia School District who were new teachers in a program there. And I always put up, reach for the moon, and should you miss, you'll be among the stars.
Love it.
Yeah, so you can't lose.
I want to thank you so much for your time today. It was truly, truly an honor and a privilege. And we're going to sign off of our first interview for Refreshing Educators, where we are encouraging lifelong learners of today with the wisdom of yesterday.
Well, you're more than welcome.
Thank you.
Stay blessed and safe.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.